Okay. Hey guys. I'm sorry. I'm so excited. I actually cannot speak normally. Because I have my best friend Simona here. If you if you've been around here for like 5 minutes, you've heard me talk about Simona. And today, like, I thought that we could talk and just chat and have everybody hang out with us. Simona
Yay.
is one of the like truest loves of my life. Like, Simona, you are just so deeply important to me. Like, you know everything about me. Like, you truly know me more than any other human being on this planet.
Mm.
And I just adore you. I could not do this. I could not have done last year without
Yeah.
you. Like, I could not have survived it. So
Thank you, sweetheart. Can I just respond to that?
sure.
I need to tell people, and hi everybody, that this woman here is one of the greatest loves of my life, and she is my longest standing friend here in the United States. We've been friends for 16 years and
Crazy.
have changed so much and gone through so much, and yet have been such good friends. Yeah, she truly is my best friend and my companion on the life journey, especially in hard times. And since we're going to talk about grief today, it just feels so right that we would be conversing about grief together. But for those of you, the few of you that don't know Erin, she is a writer, she is a vlogger, she is an amazing cook. We used to have a food blog together.
Oh my gosh, we have
food
so
is
much
amazing.
fun cooking together.
I know.
I
miss doing that.
Can this pandemic please be over?
I know, please be over.
Yeah.
But she is truly one of the most amazing human beings that has walked the face of the planet. And I'm just really, really lucky to call her my friend, sister, soul, everything.
That is exactly how I feel about you. Like, I feel like we could just spend an hour just talking about each other.
So true.
Yeah. And so how much of your like bio do you want people to know? Like, do you want to, I would introduce you, but I want you, like, I would like you to have the opportunity
to have the opportunity.
Okay. To share what you want about yourself.
Yeah. Ooh, I didn't think about this, but okay, I'm just gonna riff with it. Is that okay? Just kind of go with what comes up. Yeah. So I am Romanian American, and my family immigrated to the States when I was 14 years old. So we won't say how long ago that was, but let's just say it's 20 plus years. Or like 5 years ago.
No. Yeah, that's right.
And I met Erin actually in an MFA program where I studied as a poet and she studied as a nonfiction memoirist. And I'm still a poet. She's still doing her thing in several genres. I recently got my doctorate in poetry, and I'm working on this. Thank you. I'm working on this manuscript that came out of that journey that is not going so well at this moment, the manuscript, but that's okay.
No.
Because here's another plug for Erin. She is inspiring.
They need to know that, like, oh my gosh, like, you are the most incredible poet I have ever encountered. Like, Simona, like, when you read Simona's words, you are like transported into, I want to say like some other realm, but it's not. It's like so deep into this one. I feel like you give language to just some of the deepest parts of the human experience. And it's transformative. It's really transformative. And your book is so amazing. And when when it comes out, we are gonna have a big party on here.
And hopefully in person.
And hopefully in person.
By that point. Yeah.
Right?
Thank you. Thank you for saying that.
Yes.
Thank you for saying that.
And also they need to know that you are the most brilliant person that I've ever met in my life. Like hands down, these, like you will never be in a room with a smarter person than Simona.
Oh my gosh.
Never.
Also, you will not be in a room with a smarter person than Erin. Let's just say that. So I will receive the compliment coming from the smartest person I know. But yeah, so I have a daughter who's 4. So I had her not too long after Harper was born, and Erin's daughter Harper is my goddaughter, which is just such a privilege. And I'm just doing some really fun and cool things right now. I'm exploring embodiment, and I'm learning about just kind of how to pull together all these different areas of either interest or training in my life, which I'm not sure what they will all coalesce into, but just to bring wholeness to women. So that, I'm sure some of that work will just kind of weave its way into the conversation. But that's me. Oh, and I'm such a coffee lover. And Erin got me this cup. Of course, I had to come on and bring a cup that Erin got to me. And hopefully next time you see her, she will be drinking from the cup that I'm going to be sending her.
Yes.
Are you gonna, I know people really know you, but are you going to maybe introduce yourself a bit as well?
Yeah, well, I think I'll jump into my grief story.
Yes. Oh, that'd be awesome.
I got a grief story now. So this is something that's quite different for this channel because I'm usually talking about travel and Mexico and all of that. And hello, pandemic. I'm not, this is where I travel, right here. And I just thought, like, my gosh, I have such deep and transformative conversations with you, and we've talked so much about grief and grieving, and I've learned so much and just experienced so much this year. And I was like, man, I just wish we could all get in a room together and just talk. Yeah. And then I thought, well, why can't we do that? I mean, we can't physically all be in a room together, but there are people, that I interact with on Instagram and here on YouTube that they've walked similar journeys. Yeah. And we talk about this kind of stuff, and I'm like, you know what? We just need to hang out. Let's just hang out. And this is 2021 now, and we hang out on Zoom. So let's just do that. So yeah, I think a lot of people know already, but I'll recap. Last January 2020, my brother killed himself. And then that was January. February, we had the funeral. March, everything shuts down for COVID. And then, everybody knows how 2020 went. And I had a series of other losses in 2020, but obviously nothing, nothing came close to that, like trauma of losing my brother the way that I lost him. And I did not have a good relationship with my brother. I mean, I just didn't have a relationship with my brother. We weren't close. And so when he died, that was like, well, like we all knew we were going to cry on this video. When he died, that was like, we'll never have the relationship that I always wanted with him. It's done. And so, and also could I have done more? My sister and I knew that he was having trouble. And we knew that he was suicidal, and my sister tried everything she could to get him help, go through the DA, go or the VA, go through the police, like just everything. And nothing worked. We couldn't get him help. And so yeah, like that was a big thing for me last year, is just processing, like, how do I metabolize the fact that my brother died in this way? And what if I could have done something to change the outcome? Or what if I could have done something to have a better relationship with him? There's just all of that stuff. And when something like this happens, it also affects all the memories that you've had. Like, I look at a picture now of my brother, and it's like, there's a picture of my brother when he was 20. There's my brother who will commit suicide in 30 years. That is attached now to everything before. So that's the grief that I have been working through this last year. Yeah.
Can I just say just how honored I am, and I think what an honor and privilege it is for people to know your story.
Thank you.
And for you to be willing to talk about it openly. That takes so much courage. So thank you for doing that. Yeah, thank you. I'm so sorry.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
One of the things that you and I have talked a lot about this year was not stopping the grief process.
Yeah.
Of like diving into it and feeling it.
Yes.
And it was wondering, like, if you can talk a little bit about that as I compose myself and drink my tea.
Yes. Oh, your beautiful face. Yes. I think we as a culture are not comfortable with grief, are not maybe even like truly acquainted with it in a collective way. I think we each bear it individually, but I don't think we know how to grieve collectively. And there's cultures throughout time, and where you might see like a collective expression of grief, where people get together, where they wail, where they dance, where they have rituals. We have very few rituals around grief. Of course, we have funerals and memorial services, but for the most part, we grieve alone. And a lot of times, because we're not acquainted with it, we don't know what to do. And so I know as I've walked with you through the season, what I've seen you do, which has been incredible, is that you have let yourself feel. You have let yourself experience even what you shared just now about some of the difficulty is that the suicide colors every memory that you have. Some of the difficulty is that you don't know if you've done enough, and you wonder, you ask those questions. Have I done enough? Did I do enough? Did I pursue my brother enough, etc.? And I think as I'm hearing you say that, I'm like, yes, those are elements of the grief, even right now playing out, where it's not just the pain of loss, but then it's like the reworking of so many other things. And I'm wondering, Erin, if you want to talk about it all, what some of it felt like, if you feel comfortable putting language to what some of it felt like, and how you let yourself grieve in some concrete ways as you walked through this, and as you're still grieving it. It's just
Absolutely. I mean,
time.
Exactly. That's the thing. It's like, it's not something that, I think I read something that was like, you don't stop grieving someone you lost because you didn't stop losing them. Like, my brother is still dead, and my grief today is
Wow.
different than my grief from last year. My
Yeah.
grief in 10 years will be different than my grief today. But in
Yeah.
10 years, my brother will still be dead,
Yes.
you know, and I don't, that's not something that I want to, you know, pretend didn't happen. Like, that's my story. That's me. Now I am the sister of a brother who is dead.
Yes.
It doesn't feel honoring to me or to him
Mm-mm.
to get over it. You know, it doesn't mean that it's going to look the same way. So the process, I think, from last year, like the first initial, you know, maybe 2 months or something was, you know, just that initial like shock, crying all the time, feeling just so uncomfortable in my body. Like I would just go and take baths because it was something about like gravity felt really painful. And being in the bath alleviated some of that.
Yeah.
And I felt like I wasn't being crushed as much as I just felt like I was always being crushed.
Yeah.
But once I moved out of that initial shock, trauma, just trying to adjust to what had happened, it settled into more of like I call them waves, like waves of grief. And so I noticed, I don't remember when this happened, but sometime later in the year, I would be laying down at night, the lights off, like listening to music or something. And I would think of my brother, and then I would think of it, that like thinking of my brother would be very painful.
Yeah.
And I remember it was almost like standing at a threshold. And I knew that on the other side of that threshold was like a lot of pain, like bad pain.
Yeah.
And I could stay on this side of it, or I could go into it. And I remember just like going into it. And I remember just like letting myself think about the worst of it, you know, the most painful parts of the grief. And it was so painful. It was like a physical experience. Like I would be laying down and like my back would arch, and I would just sob silently so I didn't wake up Harbor. But yeah, it would just like it just took over my body. Like it felt physically painful, like I was being broken. And then it receded.
Yes.
And it calmed down, and my body relaxed. And I felt like I felt this relief. And that's when I started realizing that every time a wave would come, if I would just like surrender to it, it would go through me and go out.
Yeah.
Rather than this feeling of staying on the threshold, being like, hold it back, hold it back, hold it back, like this clenched feeling of just like holding the grief in my body because I can't, I'm too scared of feeling the worst of the pain. But that is actually so exhausting and so much more uncomfortable than just go through the wave, let it hurt like hell, and then it will recede. And in the wake of it, you'll be really tired for a while, and then you feel stronger.
Yes.
And I know you've experienced things like that too, right? Like, can you talk about how that feels for you?
Yes. So a couple of things. One is what you were saying just now made me think of this podcast and of a book, which I just want to put out here as a resource for people who want to just further explore how to engage with their bodies, because I'm sure you've heard so much of what Erin is saying here is embodiment. Is the grief is an embodied experience, because all of our emotions are embodied experiences, and we feel them somatically, we feel them viscerally. They're in our nervous system and in our muscles, and so this made me think of Amelia and Emily Nagoski wrote a book called Burnout, and they have a podcast with Brene Brown, and maybe we can attach that somewhere as a link or something. But they talk in that podcast about completing the stress cycle, and the fact that which is exactly what I'm hearing you say, Erin, which is so brilliant, because in some sense it's like our bodies know to do that if we allow them to. And what it sounds like to me is that you surrendered yourself to the body intelligence. Instead of, because I know our mind is like, oh my gosh, I'm in pain. How can I soothe myself? How can I make it stop? How can I medicate so I don't feel it as badly? And it does. It does hurt to surrender to this. There is an initial pain, but I think what we're saying from experience is that pain ultimately is less and leads to more life and more goodness and more energy eventually in our bodies and in our systems than when we're constricting and trying not to feel it, or when we're just repressing it or medicating it. Though of course sometimes there's nothing wrong if you want to, like, I can't feel this today and I want to go have a piece of chocolate cake. Like, okay. We're just not long-term coping that way.
Sometimes you're not ready. Like, you have to.
Sometimes you're not ready. Yes. No, and that's, and I think maybe we can come back to that. Is like, even how do we know when we're ready, and how can we even ease ourselves into it a bit? But for me, so this past year, the 2020, which I can't believe is 2021, because I feel like I'm stuck in the loop of 2020. I don't know about you. But I feel like, of course, there were losses, and I don't want to call them smaller losses, but there were losses that just the pandemic brought about. All kinds of losses of jobs and maybe financial security, and a sort of a reinvention of what daily reality is. So there was definitely, for me, a lot of grief there. But there's also been some grief that I've gotten in touch with. So I don't know if your experience has been this. I think it has, for sure, or other people's experience, but it's like something about the pandemic slowing us all down to the point to where the initial sheltering in, I mean, my husband, my daughter and I, we were at home 24/7. The only place we went is we just went and walked in the woods adjacent to our neighborhood, and maybe once in a while to the grocery store, but it was just the three of us in. And it was like everything went on pause. And I know it didn't for healthcare workers and other essential personnel, but for a lot of us, I know things just, it's like someone hit the pause button. And so for me, part of what that did is it brought up the things that I had not been dealing with, because I was busy, because I was focused on other things. As I mentioned before, I finished a doctorate degree in 2019, and something about that time, those 4.5 years in that program, and then having my daughter in the middle of that, I just didn't, there are so many things I didn't deal with, or just ended up putting on the back burner because of having to give my focus to the program. And I was going through some really difficult things with my family of origin. And so all of my focus was there: daughter, program, husband, family of origin. So, and when the pandemic hit, I feel like one of the things that really came to the surface for Darren and I, Darren is my husband, is just things from early in our marriage. We've been married for almost 9 years now, that we had not dealt with. Just painful things of early marriage that we had no shepherding or any kind of resources or help to really navigate. And both of us had dealt with it by mostly sweeping it under the rug and just trying to go on.
Mhm.
And I felt a resurgence of those things so intensely during 2020, where it was like my body, because she had time to rest and she had time to just begin to yield repressed things. And so I'm a very different person than I was when I got married. And part of my understanding too is that girl, 9 years ago, I don't think could have quite handled the things that were coming through now. And so her way of doing things was just to kind of stuff them down, slap some really, beautiful sayings or verses, Bible verses or something on top, and then keep going, because I thought that was my job in life. And so now, to contend with what came up, in a way, there was a beautiful gift in it, because I was ready for it. I was ready in a way that I wasn't ready before. And so, similarly to what you described, Erin, I would feel just physically overcome, to where it wasn't just tears, but sometimes it would feel like I couldn't, it was like something in my throat would close down, and it was like I couldn't breathe and I couldn't speak really well. And there was an intensity of energy that just emanated from me. And I was so scared of it at first, because I was like, am I having a panic attack? Like, what's happening? Which I think I was, maybe initially. And but as I sought support from you, from my therapist, from just other friends, I began to allow myself similarly to ride the waves, because something in me knew that it was time. The grief was knocking at the door again. I know that, and I'm not saying this in any kind of self-deprecating way, but I know that I had done some harm to myself by suppressing it for so long, and that it was time to step into it and find out what did it have for me? Like, what was there for me to experience, to discover about myself, and what was there for me to face, like the truth of certain things that maybe up until that point I wasn't willing to face, but at this point I was. And so I think the way that you described it as waves feels really apt. That's how it felt to me. It would feel like an enormous wave would crash over me, and I would weep. I would feel like I was suffocating. But I would sit with it. I would sit with it for as long as I could. And it always ebbed. I think that's what I want to say to people, because this may sound terrible as you're hearing us talk about it. You're like, I know we're really shit. I'm not doing that. Hey guys, I know. Hey guys, don't you want to jump on the grief train? Yeah. But I will say it always ebbs. And for me, I think in the experience of ebbing, I would enter a space where it was like the monkey mind, and all of my thoughts and ideas and analysis would just go quiet. And I would sit in that space, and honestly, what I would feel after, and this happened over and over, and this has been going on for months now. What I would feel afterwards was something akin to, I don't know what to call, like an ecstatic kind of peace. Yes. Do you resonate with that experience?
That resonates so well. Because it's funny, because anytime I publicly talk about, being in that space, being in the wave, having, working through a grief episode or whatever, people are very, I think it's very triggering for people. And they want to stop it. They're like, oh, stop. No, don't do that. Or don't do it in front of us, because we can't handle it. And I want to say, like, no, guys, no. Don't stop this, because after this, you will never see me stronger, more powerful, and more alive than a couple days after a really big grief wave.
Yes.
It's there is something about it comes over you, then you're tired for a little while. It's like you have to recover.
Absolutely.
And then something goes pop, and you were just like, ah, here I am. Like something that you were saying hit me. You're saying like going into the grief with this curiosity of like, what do you have for me?
Yeah.
That is so, so true. There is never been a wave that didn't give me something or free something up in me, break some part of me that was holding me back. Not part of me. It was like, I always say it's like my cage, you know, like I'm in here, like my little cage. And the grief comes and it's so strong and so powerful that it takes out parts of that cage. And then I can like fill up a little bit more of myself because I'm free. And every single time it's the same. It's almost like, you know, when it comes, I'm like, you know, there's part of me that's like, oh God, can I do this again? But there's another part of me that's like, all right, baby, what are we burning today? What are we burning today? What are we going to be free of on the other side of this wave?
And I can attest, Erin, because I have seen you go through this cycle again and again and again. Yeah. And I can attest to you being with every iteration of the grief. And like you're saying, it was like the grief would come, there would be a couple of days of just sort of this peaceful fatigue where you're tired, you need to sleep more, because again, and we'll come back to this in a second, but it's just like your body is completing an emotional cycle, a stress cycle. So your body's going to be tired after that. And then I would know in that past because you would send me a voice text or call me you were like an Energizer bunny in your joy and your energy, and you had 5,000 ideas for the things you wanted to do and cook and write and create. And it's just been so beautiful to see the cycle. You have been beautiful, beautiful and strong and honest in your grief. And then to see more and more the expansion of you. I have witnessed that incredibly this year. And I know that there's different factors here, but and tell me if you feel this way too. I feel like the grief is maybe the largest part of what has unlocked you in many ways. The ability to so bravely allow yourself to feel and to walk through the fire of it. And to come out and to be like, the only thing that got burned was what was the cage, to use the metaphor that you used. Not any essential part of you. No. That actually came out more strongly, more vibrantly, more, with more aliveness than I think I've ever experienced.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I can definitely attest to that.
Thank you. And I wanna talk also about the changes that I've seen in you too, because I think what this kind of grieving, it burns up a lot of fear.
Yes.
And what I have, you know, because like when you do it, then you go through it and then you're faced with, okay, do I do this thing that's really scary? And then I'm terrified to do and terrified to face. What if I hurt? Like, what if this is painful? And then you go, oh, actually, I can handle that. I know how to be in pain. And be not only survive it, but to come out braver and stronger. And so that doesn't hold me back the way that it used to. And I want to say that this is what I've seen in you too. You today, even gosh, like 6 or 7 months ago, you today, like you are so much more powerful and so much more willing to just like hold really hard things and to say like, okay, this thing, this idea or this feeling or something that's terrifying. Okay. I can do that. I can do that. And that is so inspiring. It's so inspiring to watch you do that over and over and over again. Say, okay, that's scary.
Yeah.
That's okay. I got this.
Thank you. Thank you. I do think I was just, thank you for saying that. I was thinking how grief in so many ways invites us to befriend ourselves and to know ourselves and to say that we matter. Because I think so often for me, the underlying reason I didn't give myself permission to grieve was because I didn't actually think that my feelings mattered, or had a very misguided sense of what strength was, where I thought strength was to never crack that exterior. Strength was to look like I had it all together. Strength was to force myself to keep going when I couldn't. And something about grief it invites you to know yourself, and you will discover both the places where you are delicate and fragile and where you have limitation and where you need tenderness. And it will help you discover the places where you are so much more powerful than you imagined. And I think that's what it's like with each aftermath of grief. I think that's what I've noticed about you. That's what I felt in myself. It's like a new kind of strength was birthed that didn't come out of this like grit your teeth, force yourself, it wasn't that. I don't even, honestly, as a person who lived that way and championed that way of living for decades, I will say for myself now, that wasn't strength. No, that wasn't strength. And at best, it was survival. Exactly. But the strength that's birthed out of this vulnerability, out of this ability to feel like you are cracking and exploding and fragmenting and burning up, the strength that comes out of that is so intrinsic. It's birthed out of us that we don't have to force ourselves to pull it out, it's like it just is. It just comes out, and you'll have it there when you need it for other hard shit that's gonna happen.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. I want to ask you too, because you grieved old grief. How, and I feel like
and you grieved new grief,
and I grieved new grief.
Badass.
And neither of them is really okay. But talk to me about, how did you give yourself permission to grieve something that was so old? Because I feel like a lot of the times the messages that we get are, you should be over that by now. Like, that was so long ago. Why are you digging up stuff from the past? Like, that's not fair. It's past. Like, how do you give yourself permission to grieve something you never grieved fully, like that you didn't complete the cycle? How do you give yourself permission to do that? When, there's all this stuff that says, like you like, there's a statute of limitations on grieving. Like, you can't do that. It's done. You gotta, you can't do it.
Like, why aren't you over it yet?
Why aren't you over it yet?
That's such a great question, Erin. And so this is what comes to mind, and I'm just gonna kind of riff with it for a little bit. But so one of the things is I learned through some trainings that I did and some studies in psychology and trauma and embodiment, that whatever happens to us, both in the spectrum of the ecstatic and wonderful and good, and then the spectrum of difficult all the way to traumatic, it inscribes itself in our bodies. And so this is why we've been talking about completing the cycle, because it's like, you may with your mind say, well, I should get over this, or this doesn't affect me anymore and I don't care. But the place in you that actually bears the brunt of what you experienced is your body. And so for me, as I learned more and more that my body was actually holding things, and I would go, for example, to a yoga class, or I would go to, so this is before 2020, or get a massage or have chiropractic work done. And I would find myself weeping on the table or on my mat, or I would find myself walking away and feeling really raw and finding all of these emotions that had arisen that I had no correlation to anything in the present moment. And I began to realize that whatever was coming through was experiences from the past that had just been absorbed in my body and were there. They were trapped in my hips. They were trapped in my stomach. They were trapped in my chest, my heart space. And guess what? When something would happen in the present moment that hurt, it would open up the whole giant wound, because that's how we are, right? Our nervous system is so interconnected, and one seemingly small thing can actually trigger a whole slew of other things. And I imagine that we've all seen that with the pandemic. Maybe you haven't been affected by the pandemic in like a really traumatic way, as in lost a loved one or have been sick but you have been affected by it in some way. And I'm wondering if that has actually caused a chain reaction of other things that you had thought you were done with, and now they're coming up again. Right. And so for me, it was like something about learning that and then seeing myself, experiencing those things. And well, and there's another piece to this, which I think was big permission for me. So I grew up evangelical Christian, pastor's daughter, in a very conservative church and conservative churches. And I think too, something that I learned from that particular view of God was that, again, my emotions and my body didn't matter. In fact, they were bad. My body was bad. My body was sinful. Because my emotions were about my body as well. They were probably bad and sinful. And so as I began to unravel and unlearn those things, like very, very seriously begin to question those things, I began to feel, so permission began there as well, because it was like when you begin to believe that your body is good, that your emotions are good, that your heart is good, that you are actually an embodiment of the divine, and that you can trust. I came to this place where I was like, I can trust what is emerging from me, and I can be curious. Because ultimately, I want to say this, it's not like your emotions have to be your only measure of how you should make a decision or how you're doing in life. But that's part of this three-centered intelligence that you have, body, heart, and mind, that is available to you, that has information for you. And I think coming to that place of my body is good, she's trustworthy, she is in pain, and things are coming out that are surprising me. That, like I said, I'm having reactions that feel disproportionate to my current situation, right? But again, with just what I knew and what I had studied, I realized that it was old traumas and past things. So I think that's where permission came from for me. Is a trust that my body was going to lead me through this. That if she had something to say, that I could stop and listen, One, because she had carried me already. She had held all of those things already and carried me and held me, but she had also been giving me warning signs.
Yes.
Through various illnesses and, just stress symptoms and things like that where, so I think the permission came kind of from these two spaces. Did that make sense?
I love that so much because I feel like this is the radical thing.
Yeah.
There's all this information that comes to us from external sources and that says, don't grieve, don't do this, or there's a time limit, or there's a way it needs to look like, and blah, 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 blah. And if we start listening to ourselves and our bodies, like we know how to do this. We have everything that we need. And so allowing yourself to say, okay, that's some information that you are giving me. However, there is information that I am giving me. And that's what I'm going to listen to. That is so powerful. So powerful. And I think it's just been incredible to watch you walk through this and own it and not shut it down because of, it's too late or the situation has changed. So how can I grieve something that happened then? Because that's not happening right now. Like to see you give yourself permission and give yourself the space to say, hey, what are you telling me? Like, what are you here to give me? I mean, it's just beautiful. Like it's so beautiful. And I think that's intrinsic to the strength, because it's the trusting yourself. Every time you trust yourself,
that's
every time you listen to that inner knowing, I feel like you heal the split between yourself and yourself. I feel like that we've been kind of divorced from our own bodies, from our own inner knowing, from so much of ourselves. And like every time we connect and say, hey, I see you, I hear you, you're good, what do you need? Like, you need to grieve, let's do it. Like you're like healing that split, and you are like becoming more whole. I feel like you are more whole today than I've ever seen you. And it's just it's incredible. It's absolutely incredible.
Oh my gosh, thank you. Well, I mean, part of that is and I, I'm not just like saying this for the sake of the conversation at all, but like part of that has been witnessing you do this and journeying through this together. Because I think as you're talking about this split, part of what I have noticed in your own evolution, I'm really curious if you feel like there's a catalyzing event or series of events for you in terms of, you've declared this year the year of your embodiment. Just so beautiful. The year of your body. The year of pleasure, the year of expansion. And I feel like even before you declared it, that's what you were doing. That's the work you were doing. But I'm wondering for you, Erin, when or what was it that began to give you the sense that you could trust your body? How did you go from relying on your mind intelligence and maybe external things to tell you what was right or good for you, and then began to turn inward? Like what catalyzed you? And I'm sure it's complex, but I'm wondering if you can put some words to that, because I do think a lot of us simply, we just don't know how to trust our bodies.
No.
And we've been told, like patriarchy tells us that
Mhm.
we can't trust ourselves.
Yeah.
Especially as women, we can't trust
Yeah.
ourselves. Our bodies are dangerous. Our way of being in the world is dangerous. And
Yeah.
I hope we'll get to talk more about that at some point.
Oh, yes.
We come back and talk more about patriarchy
Yes.
and what it does sort of to the feminine ethos. But
Yeah.
it's like that split that you talked about occurs from such a young age, I think.
Yes. It really
So
does. It
yeah,
really
so I'm
does.
just wondering how you navigate it, because I see you like valiantly trusting your body in spaces and in situations where you took big risks. You've been taking big risks, and yet I know that they have yielded enormous life. I've seen it again and again and again, and yet I think that must have been scary at times.
Terrifying.
A deep inner knowing. Yes. So
yes.
I just want to speak
I mean,
to
I
that.
think, gosh, there's so many levels and layers to it that I think I'll be unpacking it for like a decade.
Yes, for sure.
But yeah, I mean, I really think the physicality of the grief was part of that, getting me in touch with myself, because the grief was such a physical experience.
Yeah.
Also, the thing with my brother is that he carried a lot of darkness, and having to try to figure out how to integrate that into my story and my identity. I had to face my own shadow self.
Yes.
In the experience of, can I love someone who is so dark, who had so much darkness?
Yeah.
Can I love my brother? Do I have to divide him up into pieces and say, well, I love this piece and not that piece? Like, how do I even conceptualize of that? And through the process of facing that, which was very scary, it's scary to, when you have a family member, and I actually noticed this with people's responses to the suicide. I remember there's a professor at UNCW, which is where we met, Mike Adams. He was a very controversial figure. He caused a lot of pain to a lot of people that I love. And he committed suicide in 2020. And watching people's reactions to his suicide was extremely painful and triggering for me, because there was a lot of like, serves him right. He took the coward's way out. Like, there was a lot of really toxic, dark, like anger that people were putting onto him. And it was like impossible for me to be, someone who was grieving a suicide and not, and not know that those things are also attached to my brother. And when I would speak about that, people would try to comfort me by being like, oh no, but your brother is different. That's a different, and because I haven't talked publicly about a lot of my brother's darkness, I think, people want to make like excuses of like, well, here's the spectrum of who gets to be loved. And there's like lovable people here. And then there's kind of like problematic people here. And then there's like problematic people here. And then there's people who can't be loved, and they had put Mike Adams in this category, can't be loved. And there are people who were in my brother's life where my brother is in that category, and actually don't blame them for that. But it was like, okay, how do I metabolize how do I metabolize this? Because my brother is over here, but I'm devastated that he's gone. I'm devastated. How do I like put those things together? And working through that,
remember that,
forced me to encounter my shadow self and my darkness, and not try to say that like, well, I'm a good person because it's not too bad. You know, I'm like, I didn't have the darkness that my brother had, but we are related, you know, like, and we have the same father. We have the same grandfather and grandmother. What does that mean? We share DNA. What does that mean about me? And when I was able to integrate that and to love my brother and to see my brother as someone who is worthy of love, someone who is precious. When I was able to love him, then I knew like I can love myself. And I can, and that, like, that turn of loving myself and beginning to love my whole self, not just the parts that people like, all of it, all of it. It's all part of me. It's all part of my story. That I think that was like the critical like tipping point for me in learning to trust myself. Because I think as long as I had this like split of like, well, here's good Erin, and here's like all the stuff that I don't want to face, I don't want to look at, I'm ashamed of or embarrassed by, or I don't even want to, you know, say is like part of me. Like, as long as there was that split, I couldn't know myself, I couldn't trust myself because I was divided. And when I think when I welcomed all of it in and embraced all of it, then I realized like, oh, I can trust myself. I can trust my body because I understand more of who I am. You know, the darkness doesn't define me, but it also is there. And like, that's not something that I'm trying to ignore or put to the side. So, you know, like circling back around to my body is like, I really think that that component of learning to actually love my whole self, that dovetails so much into loving my whole body too. You know, because I feel like I also had a split between, you know, light and dark and body and soul. And when I can bring light and dark together, it allows me also to bring body and soul together, because I am my body. I'm also not my body. You know what I can't even explain it.
We are our bodies, and we're also more than our bodies. And yet our bodies are like, they're our container in a way. We can never not be our bodies.
Exactly.
You know, until whatever the next iteration of life is.
Exactly. And
I love you
part of this
saying
is you and your work in embodiment and the things that you would share with me in the class that you're teaching, that I'm taking. Like, it's just, it's all like, to I mean, I gotta write like a book about it or something, because it took me forever to like explain it all, but it's all part of a holistic thing. It's all part of a whole.
Oh, Erin, I even just want to take a moment, because I'm so moved. And I feel like first of all, everything that you're saying is so significant, but I think particularly to know how you contended with your brother's darkness, and at the same time, his incredible lovability, because he's a human being. And you did love him, and you were angry with him for certain things and didn't understand certain things. And how that so honestly took you into your own spaces of shadow. I just, yeah, I just want to pause here just to say, God, that's so honorable and beautiful.
Thank you.
And I think, not to be dramatic about it, but whatever, it's like, this is what the world needs. It's like, so often we are not facing our shadow selves. We are not facing that we are creatures that are composed of light and shadow, that are so intertwined in who we are. And so often it's like, it's why the social media culture sometimes too can be so toxic for us, because we tend to portray only what is light and what we perceive as good. And yet it's like the potency of who we are, and Jung says this, who's a psychologist that explored the notion of the collective unconscious and the unconscious and of the shadow. And it's like our deepest power and our most like latent potential actually lives in our shadow. Because the shadow is the rejected part of us. It's the part of us that whenever that split occurred, usually that split occurs when we are very young, when we experience some kind of pain or some lack of acceptance, either from our family, from a primary caregiver. And it's like, whatever we or others deem is not lovable about us, we tend to shove it away. And we come to agree that it is not lovable. Because we're so dependent on our caregivers that if they reject that part of us, we have to reject it too to survive. And I think I'm just saying this too because I'm feeling so much tenderness for all of our shadows. And we have a collective heavy fucking shadow. We have a collective heavy shadow, right? We're seeing it. We've seen it with the election. We've seen it with the pandemic. And to hear you essentially beckon your shadow and say, hey, I've rejected you, and you've done, and in the darkness, that's the thing about our shadow. It's like any part of us that's rejected, it does grow in a way. It grows, and it can become deep darkness. Like you were saying about your brother, where it's like it's deep, scary, harmful darkness, and yet that potential lives in all of us, or the manifestation of it lives in all of us. And I have to engage it in myself, and you've engaged it in yourself. Whether it's fully realized or not, it doesn't matter. It's there. We're capable of great good, and we're capable of great harm. And for you to say, hey, I see you. I've rejected you, and I've been ashamed of you, but I want to welcome you in. That, again, like I feel like I keep saying how brave you are, which is just, it's an understatement. I wish there was a better word than brave or courageous. I feel like your invitation to that part of you, with tenderness, with kindness, with curiosity, again, like you befriended yourself. You're like, who are you? And why are you rejected? And why can I not welcome you in? Why can I not welcome you in? Right. You're part of me. And the beautiful thing is that when our shadow is invited back into the light of who we are, into the fullness of who we are, it actually transforms itself, and it gives us power. I think so much of your power, of the strength that you have had to navigate this and so many other things is that it has come from that unconscious, chaotic, scary, murky, shadowy place. And yet there's like this, I know, like I felt it in you. There is so much latent power. And you have invited it in, and you have integrated it. And I know it's an ongoing process, but I've seen you do it. And I think, that's part of the invitation of grief too, wouldn't you say? Because it's like in grief, our shadow comes out. You're gonna say things. You're gonna maybe want to do things that you might be embarrassed to tell anybody. Because pain at that level it cracks you open, and all kinds of stuff comes out. But in allowing for all of that to be, and of course, like choosing ways to be safe. Like maybe,
Right.
you need to retreat and be by yourself so you can scream your heart out and say those terrible things that you want to say to your friend or your spouse or your parent. Maybe you say them to your therapist,
Right.
or maybe you write them down in a journal. So again, you
Right.
can make decisions. You don't have to go and unleash the fullness, right?
Yes.
We're going to be mindful of the people around us, and yet we need safe spaces, right, to be able to let all of that come out that is within us. And then what happens is when that comes out, it's like, it doesn't define you. It's a part of who you are that gets alchemized. It's like, because when it's brought out into the light and into the open and it gets oxygen, it transforms. It transforms. And I've seen that in you. I've seen it in myself. I've seen how.
Seen it in you too.
Thank you. I've seen how, like, the ugly parts of the grief. And I remember being on the phone with you and saying certain things that I was like, I'm ashamed of these things. I'm ashamed that I feel this way.
Yes, I know.
And yet bringing them into the light of your presence, of my presence, of this circle that we created together, and just saying, I'm just going to witness you.
Yes.
No judgment here. There's just going to be acceptance and love, and I'm just going to witness you. And you can say whatever you need to say. And I'm not going to hold you to it. I'm not going to be defined by this, because that just needs to come out of you. This has been in the dark for so long. And what I saw is that in the light of connection, of relationship, of safety, whether it's with ourselves or with others or with the divine, you can bring it in many different spaces. That part of you that seems so scary and so ugly, it alchemizes into something wild and beautiful. And it's like a caterpillar crawling on the earth and then realizing that it holds the DNA, like the DNA for wings is inside the caterpillar's body. That's what it feels like with the invitation of the shadow, in a way. It's like, whatever that is, it holds a DNA that will help you expand and transform to the next thing you're meant to be. At least that's does that feel
in fact, like,
accurate
it's
to you
so
in your own experience?
And like, I want to land the plane here. I want this to be like, this is where we end. Because it is the coming together of everything. It's like the invitation of grief, of the shadow, of the pain. You have a choice. Like, you stay outside of it and just hold it and carry it for the rest of your life, or you go into it and it's gonna dissolve you. But on the other side, you can't even imagine how good it's gonna be. It's so good. It's so good on the other side. And like you said, it transforms. The grief transforms, the pain, the shadow self, it transforms, and it's going to empower you. It's huge. It is literally life-changing. It literally changed my life. Grieving this.
I've seen it, and it's been
too
incredible to watch.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing your story so vulnerably, Erin.
Thank you for coming on here, and this will be first of many, I hope.
Yes, me too. Because even today, I feel like we opened many doors of things I think we could come back to. More of the shadow, more of archetypal work, more of embodiment.
Oh, I love you.
I love you. Thank you for sharing this space with me. I feel so honored.
Thank you. All right.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.